Hey, how's it going? So let's go ahead and get started building out our web app. So the first thing that we're going to want to do here is create a directory. I'm going to make a directory here called Solar Coffee, and then I'm going to move into that directory. If you're on Windows, then use the particular commands that you need to create that directory. Basically, we just need an empty directory to start creating the various parts of our web application. And the first thing that I'm going to do here now is to make sure that we have all the tools that we need to actually get started. So the first thing that I can do here is type in .NET --version, and you should see a version 3 point something here on your terminal or later. You're going to want to use at least version 3 here. I'm running 3.1 at the time of this recording. At the end of the year 2020, which is the year that this video is being recorded, .NET is scheduled to jump to version 5. They're jumping over version 4 because it's for a long time been the current version of .NET Framework, which was a version of .NET that was basically for Windows only. And since then we've had .NET Core 1, 2, 3, and then at the end of 2020 we're scheduled to have version 5. But as long as you're on version 3 point something, then you should be able to follow along with this tutorial. Next up, we're going to check the Vue CLI version that we have, and to do that we do the same thing here except Vue-version, and I've got version 4.1.2 at the time of this recording. And then finally, we can check the version of pSQL that we're running here. Again, pSQL isn't actually a strict requirement for following along with this tutorial. It is just the CLI that we have to interact with our Postgres database, which we will want to make sure is, of course, running. If you're not using pSQL, then I would recommend using something like pgadmin, which is a GUI that runs in a web browser and is a way to interact with the Postgres database. There are other tools out there like DataGrip, but you're just going to want to have some way to execute queries on the Postgres database that we have. Now I can check, I think it's brew services list, and I can see on my Mac here that I am running a Postgres server here. So if you're on a Mac and you have set up Postgres using brew, you should be able to type in brew services list and make sure that's started. You can also run Postgres directly from a binary that you download, as shown in the first video. So just make sure that you have a Postgres server and that it is running. All right, so now what we're going to do is actually create our Vue project. And for that, using the Vue CLI, I can do Vue create, and I'm going to call this solarcoffee.frontend. And what this is going to do is actually take us through some different options that we have here. And if you've used Vue CLI to make projects in the past and saved the preset, then you'll see them here. So that's why you see these top 2 presets are apparently things that I've used for other projects in the past. But we're going to go ahead and manually select features just so that we're sure we're all using the same setup. We're going to go ahead and use Babel and TypeScript and router and Vuex and a CSS preprocessor because we're going to be using Sass for this project. And we're also going to be using unit testing. We'll be doing some end-to-end testing, but we're going to set that up separately with Cypress, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. Next, it's going to ask us some basic questions about how we like our project set up. First, it's going to ask us if we want to use class style component syntax, and I like that style, so I'm going to say yes here. It says use Babel alongside TypeScript, required for modern mode, auto-detected, blah, blah, blah. We're just going to say yes. And then use history mode for router. We're going to say yes. And we'll talk about history mode a little bit later. Pick a CSS preprocessor. As I mentioned, we're going to be using Sass and let's see, Dart Sass or Node Sass. I'm just going to say use Node Sass here. And then pick a linter. I like prettier. There are lots of different ways to lint JavaScript and TypeScript code, but we're going to choose prettier here. And then does it want us to choose whether we lint on save or lint on fix or lint and fix on commit? Yeah, sure, we'll lint and fix on commit. And then what do we want to use as a testing solution? I like Jest, so let's go with that. And where do you prefer placing the config for Babel, ESLint, etc.? I definitely like using separate config files for that. And then it asks us if we want to save this as a preset. If you do want to save it, then you could say yes, and you could save it as whatever, this is your personal favorite preset. So I'm just going to call it solar. All right, so you can see that it's using yarn here, and what it's doing is actually setting up the entire project. It's going to install some of those dependencies that we selected in the previous process here. All right, so just after about a minute or two, we can see that the CLI has finished scaffolding out our project, and it tells us that we can cd into the directory and then yarn serve. So if I ls here, it looks like we have this new directory here, so I can cd into it, and I can see that there's a bunch of stuff in it already. So let's just go ahead and run yarn serve and see what happens. Okay, so as expected, of course, there are no errors yet. So it says our app is running on port 8081. And so we should be able to visit 8081 in our browser and take a look. And check it out. So it should appear something like this. It says, welcome to your Vue.js app. And it shows us some of the things that we installed here, Babel, TypeScript, Vue router, and that sort of thing. So far so good. It even has a link here. You can see that it's changing the URL in the browser. We shouldn't see any hashtags in the browser here. We're going to be using, and we are using history mode in Vue router, and as I mentioned, we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But at this point, congratulations, because you have taken the first step at setting up the application, which is creating this Vue app. In the next video, we're going to spend some time setting up what's required for our .NET Web API, so stay tuned for that one.